Hi, this is Martin Drummond, and it's September 9th, Monday, 2019. And I'd like to explain trade real quick with you in terms of how I was taught it in school, because it's like when you take macroeconomics, it's the only part that makes any sense. It's like, okay, countries produce things, and when they produce too much of something, then they trade it to their neighbors. So like, if we overproduce corn, if our people can't eat it, then we try to sell it to other countries, either for, promissory note or direct. I guess it's always promissory note, and then you use that to pay for whatever, but in a way they're trading corn for wheat or whatever. Or in our case, we're usually getting their precious metals or their, some natural resource. After that, there's really not a lot in a macroeconomics book that makes any sense, because it's always trying to explain capitalism, right? To apologize for capitalism, to say that there's some reason that's important enough to do the things that they do. But essentially, essentially, the capitalists, everything they do is designed to promote a lack of scarcity. I mean, not a lack of scarcity, to promote scarcity, so that people don't have enough. So whether it would come to trade or simply the economy, not making sure that companies or the government or whoever, not making sure that they supply enough money to buy the things they need, right? That keeps them afraid. It keeps them, like they're at the teat of their mother, and they're still hungry, but the spout runs dry, right? So that keeps them ready to pitch in. Fear. Oh my God, go work some more, little puppy, and come back, and I'll turn it back on. So that's how they control, and of course, I'm for communism because as an economic system, it's a command and control system instead of or at least theoretically, it's supposed to supply the people with the things they need, and to however much it can, the things that they want. right? Uh, and this is a long-term goal. I mean, the equality of it would come over time. But essentially, it's human beings who have no no interest in the outcome except that as a part of the 30 million people in this country, it would make sure that they got their fair share. And it would also make sure that everybody worked for their fair share to the extent that they can. Obviously, people who are paralyzed and stuff, they would do what they could, right? So the capitalists promote capitalism as a free market, kind of to say that there's some kind of market god who decides who doesn't get what they need. It relieves them of the responsibility in the minds of the poor who don't understand that it's actually them who's doing it. Because it doesn't, I mean, it's obvious to everybody that it doesn't provide everything that we need. See? And they're afraid under their system that if they provide more of what they need, what people need, then they're gonna have the money they're gonna, they'll have more money for what they want. And they don't want people getting what they want, even more than what they need. Well, I don't know if that's true. I'll have to think about that. Anyway, so this has all been kind of to get around to my main point. My main point is that when you cut back, right, okay, if you cut back to the level of the United States or the United Kingdom or Canada, Europe, then it only, it's a sliding scale. It produces crime. Obviously drug dealing is the quickest and easiest way, and just the black market in general. When you don't supply enough money to people to get what they need, let alone what they want, then the motive produces criminals, right? People start stealing, people start selling drugs, people start using drugs, but for a different reason, because they want to escape the reality. Kind of like, well, if I'm gonna die from poverty, a rich guy gets a morphine drip, why shouldn't I? Right? Okay, so all of that starts happening, and capitalists know this. They know this is kind of the side effect of putting on the pressure of lowering the money supply, not allowing money out there for people to spend. And when you cut it back enough, it becomes like a steel cage death match for the poor. And then you get kind of a culture of steel death match culture, you know, and that kind of feeds upon itself. And then you get to the worst of it, like places like Honduras and Guatemala and Mexico, where capitalism has just completely failed, or not completely. They never let it quite fail, but it's failed in terms of it's produced like warfare in the country, kind of like undeclared war. And let me just explain to you exactly how all this happens, right? See, that kid's learning right now. I mean, he's probably going to grow up to become a killer. Contract killer or something. Or maybe a mule or whatever. And can you really blame him? I mean, at 1 and 2 years old, he was already seeing where he was headed. You know? I'm not going to put up with this. You know, I'm a human being. I'll go out and get what you know. And yeah, he's probably going to end up dead or in prison or something. But he doesn't understand that. He just knows that this is bullshit, right? This is the kind of anger I'm talking about. I mean, you can see it in his eyes already, and he's just a baby.
Va a ir que no pedís por necesidad. Hija, porque ando trabajando por necesidad, pues. No ando robando, pues. Siempre te los tres vivimos, pero no trabajamos. Te voy la verdad. Yo le dije que me dijera, entonces ella me dijo.
So, you know, when people live in situations like this, you're developing their emotional side, right? I mean, they're being angered by, okay, first they're poor, so they're angry, and then they try to go out and steal or whatever because it's all that they can do. Or maybe they kill somebody because they couldn't get justice through the justice system. You know, this is a constant problem all over the world where justice is not being properly done and people feel like they have to get revenge, right? That's the only justice they're going to get. And most people just eat it, you know? They just suck it up and, you know, in a way that's really pussy. I mean, if if you look at it. I mean, for a man to come along and get totally screwed by somebody, a cop or a judge or something like that, and then just to sit back and do nothing, or maybe he tries and tries to get justice from other people but can't, and then not to get even in some way, that's really pussy. And I'm a pussy. I've been kicked around by people all my life, and I've never gone and gotten revenge, and I will continue to not do that, but obviously for other reasons. Obviously, if I felt like I was a pussy, I would probably go do it, but there's a lot of other reasons. You know, there's the fact that I don't want to be well, for one thing, I mean, I've got the rest of my life left. If I go out and get revenge, then I have to give that up, right? One way or another. I either have to run or I end up in jail, or worse, right? So, you know, people like me, we put up with people screwing us and hurting us, and there's really not much we can do about it unless we're ready to end our lives. And so you wonder why, you know, the media doesn't even bring up the idea that, oh, these people who kill themselves, you know, or get killed by the cops or whatever, might have had a legitimate reason. But then in the end they all end up killing the wrong people, or do they? Because is everybody who's sitting around and just ignores the person's well, I got in trouble for doing this before, but I'm gonna use myself as an example, right? Nobody seems to really care that I was put in jail for something I didn't do. I mean, everybody's just willing to not worry about it. Nobody came to my jail and protested. Nobody, you know, started a civil war over it. Nothing. Nobody cares. And how does that make me feel? I mean, it makes me feel like, and that there's no place for me to go where the people aren't apathetic, right? And I'm not blaming them, but I'm just admitting how I feel. You know, they threw me in jail for just that, for admitting how I feel, for admitting that they make me so angry, and this is just a temporary thing, you get over it, and you know, that you feel like killing somebody. You feel like killing the person who's causing your anger. Of course, you don't even really know who they are. You don't know who to blame. I mean, just because somebody did something to you doesn't mean that they're the ones who are at fault. Maybe it's the people who make the policies. You know, maybe it's the president or the governor, or you know, all these right-wing nutjobs who hire and fire these people. You don't know who it is, really. It's kind of hard to figure out. You would need a bunch of scientists to get together and study the problem to understand why this person down at the bottom screwed Joe Blow, right? But that aside, that's what's got me thrown in jail, was saying that they're making. I was really talking about how they make all the people who come in and try and get whatever the government is saying they give. So whether it's the police and you're trying to get justice, or the food stamp people and you're trying to get food stamps, or the Obamacare people and you're trying to get Obamacare, I was trying to prove that they're purposely frustrating people in the hope that they'll just go away, right? And so they threw me in jail for saying that, and claimed that it was a bomb threat or a terroristic threatening. And there's no way that it could possibly be terroristic threatening. I mean, I'm just having a discussion about, just like we're having right now, having the same discussion we're having right now. Is this illegal? Just for me to discuss it? To try and understand the mechanisms that produce the violence that we're all experiencing, at least on TV. I mean, not personally. There's only hundreds of people out of hundreds of millions who actually experience it, so it's actually pretty hard to experience it. But you know what? We all experience the anger and the situations that I think they cause it. And they're caused by people at the lower levels who are probably doing what they're told. They're told to frustrate people. That's their way of making sure, in their minds at the bottom, they're making sure that people who don't qualify don't get in. But as it turns out, they're going overboard, and they're frustrating people out of the benefits that they deserve. And the system also is not producing the benefits it needs to produce, right? In my case, I'm 58, and don't listen to all these people about, oh, it's healthier to have a job, people should work till they die, and people should work 3 jobs, and all this bullshit. I mean, when it comes to you participating in the system that produces essential goods and services for all of us, it should be reasonable. I mean, I think that working for, okay, so if you count kindergarten on up and then you start to work, that's till you're 18. All of that is preparation for work, if you're honest about it, and preparation for participating in our system. And then it's training. It's off-the-job training. Okay, and then once you're 16 or so, you start working, and that's, so let's just call it 15 for the sake of argument, so that you say 55. So 15, 25, 35, 45, 55. That's 40 years. And you can't tell me that a person can't qualify for everything they need. A house, according to the size of whatever their household is. So like once you're 55 and you retire and your wife retires and that's 2 people, you go to a smaller house, right? And then if you're, so Um, so you, geez, I lost my track of thought. Anyway, so 40 years, that should be enough. Now, if you want to work after 55, you ought to get extra credit, right? Okay, but after 55, you should have a house and all the things you need, and you should have a retirement income. Not necessarily a savings account or anything. We should eliminate the need for a savings account, by just giving people what they need, right? A monthly income or whatever, retirement, like Social Security. You get it per month till you die. So, and I did that. I started working at 16, and I worked right up till, well, actually I only worked up till about 53, but that's because I went to Europe and tried to see if I liked this girl enough to marry her. But I tried to work while I was in Europe. It's just that you couldn't get without a special kind of card, and I didn't I don't know. It just seemed completely daunting. I mean, I went around to different places in town and asked if I could get a job, but they all told me, well, you're American and you have to, I think you had to have some kind of permit, was what they all told me. Anyway, I'm not going to make excuses. I worked for doing outdoor for 23 years in the heat. I worked in the snow. I worked in 105 degree heat in the summer. I worked sanding on bumpers because it was mobile auto body until my fingers bled several times. I worked from Monday through Saturday, quite often, at least 8 hours, and quite often 12, up to 12 or 13 hours. So many times go home, fall asleep, get up, go back to work, right? So what I'm saying is that's unfair. You should, no matter what your job is, you shouldn't have to work hard. You should be allowed to pace yourself so it's not strenuous work or overbearing work, causing you to suffer while you're on the job, as in, so tired. Just do the work and get it done, right? And no, you shouldn't have to work, 12 hours or 13 hours. You shouldn't have to work 6 days a week. 5, 4 should be enough. If everybody did their part, I'm sure that would get things done, right? But the fact is we have lots of people sitting around doing basically nothing because we're not organized. Capitalism doesn't organize people for efficiency, and one of the indicators of that should be the fact that 2 out of 3 people have no income in this country. 2 out of 3 people have no income between the ages of 18 and whatever. No income. So you have to ask yourself, well, what are those people doing? They're not working. So there's a huge pool of people who aren't working. They're obviously getting money off of other people, or their illegal things, or they're just sponging or whatever. I hate to call it that, but because you got to survive, and obviously it's not such a horrible thing, or there wouldn't be 2 out of 3 people doing it. And trust me on the numbers. I've been through this. You can go look up the number of people in the United States between the ages of 18, over the age of 18, and then look up the number of people who are gainfully employed, and you will find out that they are 1/3 of that total population. Just go to Wikipedia and look up employment or whatever. I forget what I looked up, but you can find it if you really doubt me, because I already did a segment like this on that. I'm not going to do it again for you. Okay, so yeah, I mean, that's exactly what happens. And the capitalists, the small group of people who are running the show, they know this. And they know that, at the far end is that steel cage death match. If they just cut back on the money supply, and I'm not talking about on the money supply and how much is in the country, like how many dollar bills there are, or how much credit there is, or anything like that. If they, and by the way, as long as we're on that, isn't credit, I mean, that's yet another way of keeping track of people and what they're doing with their money, but also a way to hold them hostage, right? If you get them in debt to you, instead of giving them the cash and letting them spend it, if you get them in debt to the credit card companies and what have you, then you know exactly who they are, where they are, and you can hold that over their head, right? So it's no coincidence that all these little things are being done the way they're being done. So they know that at this end of the spectrum there's a steel cage death match, and so do we. I mean, we're just as aware of it as they are, and we're fighting not to end up in that end. Okay, so I wonder what's on the other end. So it would be logical to assume on the other end, if you supply people with the money they need to buy everything they need, and at that point you don't allow them to spend anything on what they want until they've bought everything they need, right? And they've got everything they need, and maybe some money for what they want, depending on what they want and what can be produced. See, that's a command and control economy. And I'm not saying we don't have a command and control economy. We do have a command and control economy. Capitalism just pretend like they're not in control so they can avoid responsibility for the shit mess that they produced, right? But in reality, they do control it. They decide, how and when to let money out and stuff, and when to suck it back in. And that's why we have income inequality, because they're just holding that money in the hands of their their thugs, their Bezoses and their, whoever, the rich people. But, so when I talk about a command and control economy, I'm talking about it being run to actually produce the things that people need and get it into their hands. In capitalism, or vulture capitalism as I love to call it, it's a command and control economy, but it's designed to make sure the things they need don't get into their hands, to provide scarcity, to cause people to be afraid and bend them to your will. And it doesn't make sense, really, does it? Unless all that you're doing is really just to maintain your wealth. So whoever you are out there, you're working to make sure you keep your wealth. And I've come to the conclusion that it's in their interest to keep the vast majority of people dumb and poor, and constantly spending every moment of their day trying to figure out how they're going to get what they need, and running around making sure they get what they need, even to the extent of frustrating them over food stamps or whatever, because then they constantly have to think about that and figure out how to do that, right? And as I've said many times, the economy, the economic system is a closed box. It's not like you can, I suppose you could run off to the wilderness if there's such a thing. Is there a piece of land in this world that isn't owned by somebody where you can go and maybe study up on wilderness survival before you go and then successfully survive in the wilderness? Because the last person I heard of who tried to do that starved to death and ended up eating poison berries because, this is a very, there's nobody else around if you're going to do that. It's just not an option. Let's face it. You're stuck inside the system. And it makes you feel like your only option is to try to either move up in the system or cheat the system, right? And if you cheat the system, more often than not, you end up in jail, and then you end up in that cycle, right? So there is another option, and that is to change the system. So to change it so that it attempts to provide the money to the people that they need for what they need, rather than the opposite, what the rich are doing to maintain their wealth. And of course, I've explained to you over and over again that I don't want to take anything away from the rich. They don't need all that massive amount of money. They can just have their lifestyle, and they don't need to be in control of all the production and everything to have their lifestyle. They can go to, fly around the world and see things and do all the things the rich people do now. We can guarantee them that in exchange for staying out of politics and staying out of economics. and whoever takes over, they won't be allowed to, whoever works in that system that we eventually evolve will not be allowed to work in the interest of any particular small group of people. Like right now it's venture capital or vulture capitalists. Yeah, maybe it is venture capitalists. But vulture capitalists, they won't be allowed to do that. They will concentrate on producing enough that they can supply everybody, black people, Hispanics, anybody who's an American citizen, and to a greater extent, we should do this all around the world. This is the old, communism rising speech, export communism. And I don't want you to be frightened by that because of your programming. I'm an incrementalist. I believe in doing this very slowly and very carefully. Do it so you don't tear down the rich. You maintain their wealth. Their wealthy lifestyle, not their wealth, because their money needs to, they don't need it. If through the government, through the system, they're being supplied with all the money they need if they want to go to Cancun and spend the summer there, or if they want to go to San Moritz and go skiing, if they want to go visit their friends here and there, if they want to have a big party, whatever. If they want to have a big fancy house, if they want to have any place that they want to go and do things. Obviously not just to possess them. They can't own 1,000 houses because they can't live in that many of them. And so, it'll be reasonable. And it's not going to cost anything because they already have way more than what they need. So if anything, it's going to shrink down their burden on society. So saying that buying them off is like not fair, maybe it isn't fair, but at least it avoids this warfare that we're looking at. You're talking about punishing them and then taking things away, taking everything away from them and everything. I don't want to do that. We can get what we want without doing that. So why cause a big problem, right? Believe me, this is the best way to do it. And then, of course, we'll use our control to make that system that I talked about, for essential goods and services, so that everybody gets what they need. And it may be hard in the beginning because in the beginning there's not going to be enough to go around. So we're going to have to all share what there is. And I suggest we just do it in the United States because I think we can afford to do it here without it hurting too bad. And then once we get everybody moving and producing, and through automation, you've got automation coming and all these technologies, and we should work on the keeping the population like it is right now. I think we can support 350 million people, say. God, there were only, I think, 150 million when I was born in 1960. But anyway, so if we can, come up with new technologies, we need to invest in new technologies in population control. Well, we need to be creative. We'll come up with an answer so that everybody can have a couple of kids, that survive and reproduce and stay at below 350 million. And if that's too much, if it turns out that our land will not support that many people in it, that high a population, then we'll come up with a scenario for lowering the population. Just from people dying of old age and stuff. Okay. I think that's all of it. It was kind of hard to put it all together in the beginning because I was running into mental blocks, but overall I think I've covered it all. We don't want to.
An entire community. Each day, residents sift through piles of garbage, picking out anything of value, either to keep or to sell. There's a lot.
And so that's a capitalist situation where people are not being paid enough, right? I mean, that's the scarcity that they're creating the steel cage death match. People are, doing things much worse than what they want to, or not want to, but they shouldn't have to do that, right? Yes, they should work, and everybody from the richest person to the poorest person should have to partake in all of these different, and if they do that, then even the richest person is going to understand what's wrong with the way things are working and work to make them better. Yeah, I can see a problem here. If we give the rich people this wonderful life I was talking about, they're not going to have any incentive to do shit jobs, which won't be as shitty anymore because everybody will work to figure out a way to make them bearable, right? To where they don't, and since everybody will only be sharing in the different types of different levels of jobs, from what people really don't want to be doing up to maybe the top where they're ordering people around and all that, executives and all that, to ditch diggers, and then everybody will work to make all those jobs safer and more pleasant, as long as we get the work done. But I say, those small, because while we're giving them all that they want, we're also going to be isolating them, because they're going to become a symbol of all the unfair things and of our past. Over time they're going to become like that, and people are going to not want anything to do with them because they come from that. I don't know, maybe we should not allow their children to have that privilege. Maybe we just allow maybe a certain number of generations so that dies out. I don't know. We'll have to debate it, right? I mean, at that point we'll have a real government where we where scientifically people debate these things and come to I believe we can come to the proper conclusions one way or another, and that's how you fix things, right? We'll figure it out.
Yo voy para la basura a recoger cartón, plástico, para hacer mi pista, para comprar el frijol, todo.
So these are the same guys, right, that we've seen all of our lives. You know, the guys pushing the shopping cart from the grocery store full of tin cans. I mean, this isn't just Guatemala or Honduras. Guatemala. But instead of being a 60-year-old black guy, this is a 6-year-old brown guy.
About Guatemala's elite commando forces, the Caibils.
Welcome to the Academy of the best Special Forces unit in Latin America.
The noisy reception is part of a rare invitation to the Special Operations Training Center in the Petén jungle.
Training people to kill. This is the death match. So you make people desperate enough, they'll join the army and they'll kill the people who aren't in the army, who don't like the government, etc. This is evil. This is evil. Whether they're doing it out of desperation and then they become people like this who like it. At least they think they like it. They kind of have to, you have to convince yourself to like it, right?
To see for ourselves how one of the world's most feared commando units is trained. The Caibils were created in the 1970s to combat left-wing guerrillas and became infamous for their brutality, accused of carrying out countless massacres against civilians. Today, they're
the steel cage death match. So
the mission is to help fight Guatemala's new enemies, organized crime and drug trafficking. They are efficient killing machines. Their motto, if I advance, follow me. If I stop, urge me on. If I retreat, kill me.
El Caibil es preparado, entrenado, tanto no.
The Caibil is trained in water, land, and air operations. They are trained to move
physically and psychologically. Only a few make it through. Are taught to kill and eat anything that moves, raw. But they can go without food or sleep for days and still be ready to fight. To overcome any obstacle with ironclad discipline, because drug cartels want to incorporate into their structure. In fact, Mexico's violent Zetas cartel has been recruiting former Caibils, not just as hired guns, but to actually train its members in the more refined and dangerous arts of military warfare.
Now make no mistake about this. The drugs and the crime, they are very much kind of a broken version of socialism and communism. I mean, they are trying to get money where money won't go. So they're in a very destructive way. They're basically trying to do what vulture capitalism doesn't do: spread the money around. So don't be too sure that that there's that much of a difference, the complete disconnect between crime and socialism, because they are closely linked, although socialism proposes to do what crime does without the crime, right? And so you got, man, this just perfectly illustrates the way the violence feeds off of the poverty, which feeds off of which is caused by the capitalism, the vulture capitalism. So they're now paying guys who used to do this, which, let's face it, man, they're criminals. These people are evil, and they're criminals, no matter how much it's necessary, because poverty drives people to crime. So then you can claim that it's necessary then. Well, it's not really, because what's necessary is to end the poverty that causes the crime, instead of killing off the people who become criminals. I mean, it's just insane. I mean, you got the whole cycle, right? You got the people training to kill all these people, and then you've got them being hired by the people who are criminals to train them. Wow. Just a total, it's a total violent cycle.
Unidentified bodies fill the refrigerators.
Bien, este es son unos restos óseos que nos hicieron llegar de origen desconocido. Lo encontraron en la carretera de Juárez y Ascensión. De hecho, estas sí son ocasionadas alrededor de la muerte.
So they say this drug war has killed 150,000 people over I don't know how long. But I mean, that's an enormous amount of people, and if everything I say is true, you can really lay all their bodies at the doorstep of the vulture capitalists.
Antes de la muerte, algo o alguien te provocó una rotura de costillas.
So if you want to say, even though I don't promote a revenge or even justice, I say let it go. As long as you fix it, let it go. But you could honestly say these vulture capitalists, what they do to promote scarcity, and I'm going to show you that before I go. You can say that they really, if justice were done, they would be held responsible for all these, even if they're ruthless murderers that have been killed, even if some of these people, I mean, most of them aren't, but even if they were, they wouldn't have even been doing that if they weren't like this as a little kid. I mean, start here. Change these kids' lives from 1 year old, Otherwise you become responsible for what they do. And then when you kill them, you're responsible for murder. Am I getting through to you at all? I mean, you're killers. You're murderers. The guys you're murdering aren't the ones who are guilty of murder. Their murders are on your heads. You produce these people. You produce them here. You produce them here. You know, you even produce them here. This is me filming a fire, and this guy just comes up and starts blathering about what's going on.
Mom's kicking them all out and they don't like it now. My little brother, he took off. I don't know where he's at. He's supposed to be, I don't know. My sister, I went in there and put a chain on it, keep them all out of it, and this is what we get to it. Yeah. I take the doorknob out and I run a chain.
So this is in a place called South Point in Ohio, around Huntington, Ashland, Kentucky, Huntington, West Virginia. It's on the other side of the river, of the Ohio River in Ohio, called South Point. And that guy just said it all. I mean, it's about people and scarcity, and I think that probably they tried to keep warm in this house because she owns both houses. I mean, here's another example. I mean, how does our economic system produce people who own all these houses with nobody in them and their own family? They're kicking them out of these houses that they don't live in, but maybe they want to rent it out, right? So they can make more money, so they can afford to pay for their health care or something. I don't know, but
all the way around it. I had the keys to it, if they wanted to get in that door or not.
well, I do believe I have
An hour before then-President-elect Felipe Calderón was due to be sworn in, opposition lawmakers tried to block the doors of Mexico's congressional chamber. Members of the ruling party chanted, "We want peace." Calderón
yeah, I'll bet they want peace, right?
He had hit
Jesus.
the ground running on a new path paved with good intentions. But it wasn't one of pacifism. He started with his home state of Michoacán, where drug violence had gotten out of hand, deploying federal security forces with the aim of taking down top cartel bosses.
Durante las actividades de interdicción y hostigamiento que llevaron a cabo en el Estado, respetar en todo momento los derechos humanos de la población civil.
But security forces in this new war would be accused of committing widespread abuses, including torture, killings, and disappearances.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not working, people. You know, and isn't it a sign of things to come in this country? I mean, are things going to degenerate this way? Have they already? I mean, I mentioned, you know, the guys pushing shopping carts full of cans. This has been going on for a long time. We're just one step away from, you know, this. People running down the street, fleeing the army. I mean, isn't that our ultimate fear? Is that our own army becomes the enemy, chasing people around? Well, it is a bleak picture. I've already offered you the solution, and that's to morph this economy into the one that I see. You know, I could do it. I think you could do it. I think, you know, I mean, if I could get everybody to do what I want them to do, I could do it. But it'd probably be better if you guys all get together and do it with each other, right? And me. look, I don't want anything out of it. I'm one of these better off people. I mean, yeah, I'm poor, but I've figured out ways to get what I need. Maybe not everything, but most of it. And some of the things I want, I mean, obviously I've got a computer. But, you know, so, change, the only thing that change could bring me is less. So I have no horse in this race. As a matter of fact, I stand to lose my horse. I only do this because I strongly believe that in my vision of a better world, a world where everybody, I mean, obviously you're never going to be able to take care of everybody. I mean, you can try, but there's always going to be problems. Or maybe there aren't. Maybe we can get to a place where it becomes normal for everybody to get up in the morning and know they've got a place to live, and electricity and food and water and transportation, and maybe even, you know, a couple of the luxuries they like, maybe a boat to go fishing, or just fishing stuff, or you know, definitely need like bicycle or things like that for, you know, your health. Those are things that you need too. But, you know, maybe you enjoy art or quilting or music. You know, those things can get pretty expensive. I'm not sure if we can really provide everybody with all those things, but we can try. So it is complicated, but, you know, I think it would be worth trying. This is Martin Drummond with Progressive News. Thanks for watching. Going out of business, huh?
Yeah.
Get some video before they close. thought I'd get some video before the place closes.
All right, go right to what we like.
Where's Scott at?
Scott, he's a good-looking guy right there.
These guys were another victim of Walmart. Can you make the train go around one time for me? For my video? Get your... Thanks. Appreciate it. So what are you going to do?
No hungry.
Oh, yeah? Going to be looking for...
Line up about 11, so I'll probably get for about 10:30.
I know you really are some silly dream that into my life. Yeah. He lost his store. Because he couldn't, charge the prices he was charging was, sometimes 10 times as much as Walmart, and that wasn't his fault. For himself. Scott, how long was this place open? How long was this place open?
At least 70 years.
70 years? Just a little town on the Ohio River.